My name is Aine McGlynn.
And I'm Lizz Bryce. For most of our careers, we've been deep in the weeds of charities and technology, but most interested in the people who use it. I'm SVP Community and Strategic Initiatives at Canada Helps, Canada's largest online donation and fundraising platform, and a charity ourselves.
And I run a small consultancy focused on the digital needs of small charities. We're your hosts of Digital Comfort Zone, a super not scary technology podcast for the people powering nonprofits in Canada.
In 2023, Canada Helps launched Charity Growth Academy to help you kickstart your digital transformation. Now we're excited to bring you this podcast that rarely talks about your tech stack and instead focuses on the people who make it work each day. Anya, this week we have 3 anecdotes from 3 separate organizations that all essentially say the same thing, which is we're not big enough to benefit from technology or to invest in it. So one of them, we're so small with so few people, I expect very little impact from using technology better. Or technology will have minimal impact. We're a very small organization. We do not have our eyes on any single innovation, nor do we believe we need any at the present time.
Oof, doubling down, even no, don't need it.
I don't know who they are and I don't know where they're from, but it's interesting how close the wording is even from these organizations that are having the same gut reaction.
Totally. It's the old, we're too small for any of this to matter argument. And I suspect that you see that objection in relationship to fundraising strategies, different impact measurement strategies. There's an idea that if you're really small, you won't see a difference in how you work or serve communities by making these kinds of changes. It's as though they kind of are in the mindset that only big and immediate and visible impact are the only things worth working towards.
But of course, we know that small change, even something as straightforward as using a sign-up form for programs or for your volunteers and events, instead of saying, email us or go to the website, those kinds of small things can have a big impact on an organization. For example, so it's about giving stakeholders self-serve actions. So instead of saying, send me an email, and then somebody reads that email and sends it on to the right person, you might have a form on the website that directs it to the right person automatically. And even though that seems like a small change, if you're a small organization, which is 80% of the organizations in this country, prioritizing staff time on work with the most impact is what's going to serve your mission better. And it's also going to make people like their jobs a lot more.
100%. And that's just like a small action that we're describing, right? Just replacing an email address with a sign-up form, right? These are not massive transformations, right? And yet you're still seeing there's a lot of resistance. And it can be a sort of easy pattern of thinking to fall into that small actions don't have a big impact, but we absolutely know that they do, right? There's that old saying, which I love, is when you're looking for shade, the best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago. But the second best time is today, right? So it's like planting the seed today is not going to solve your immediate shade problem. But it sure will set you up for success in the future so that then, when you are looking for that shade, it will be there because you decided to take that action.
Exactly. Charities of all sizes will begin to reap the benefits of the sometimes small actions they take to leverage digital. Maybe not tomorrow, but definitely in a few weeks, months, and years.
Absolutely. And so to kind of come back to this whole theme of planting seeds today and waiting for them to bear fruit really connects beautifully, I think, with our really incredible guest today. We're really lucky to have 2 people today who are deeply, supremely, 100% committed and dedicated to showing people that their small actions can have massive impacts.
Amanda Munday is the Executive Director of New Majority, Canada's nonprofit, nonpartisan youth civic engagement engine. New Majority works to make participating in democracy easy, to ensure young people understand how to use their voices and build a strong civic identity with a laser focus on getting out the vote.
And Chi Nguyen, the Executive Director of Equal Voice. Equal Voice is Canada's only multi-partisan organization dedicated to electing women to all levels of government. Chi is a past candidate in a provincial election. She holds an MSc in social psychology from the London School of Economics, and Chi has worked for more than 20 years as a community builder.
Welcome, Chi and Amanda. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, we're really delighted to have you as part of the Digital Comfort Zone. Very excited to hear what your experiences have been in civic engagement and getting people connected and excited about politics in Canada. And so obviously you both work for organizations where there is a focus on civic engagement, on getting people connected to political life in this country. Over the course of that work, what have you learned about getting people involved in a political system or in civics? That is a massive question, I realize. So feel free to take the next 4 or 5 days to answer it.
We need more than that.
Yeah, best Reader's Digest version.
Well, I think for me, I've been sort of in and around this space for over 20 years. And what's always both surprised me and kept me going is people's optimism about systems that exist in our country and the belief that these are systems that can serve us and should serve us and that we should have a place within them. Our work at Equal Voice is about helping women get the skills, women and gender diverse folks get the skills, the knowledge, the community they need to help them on a political path. You know, not everyone who comes to our campaign schools necessarily puts their name on a ballot, but many of them get involved in campaigns in whatever shape or way or form that makes sense for them. And we think that's great for Canadians. We want Canadians to roll up their sleeves and get involved in helping to elect great people, and in particular, electing different and diverse voices so that government looks more like our communities.
You know, for us, it's easier than it seems. So, you know, when even in the way you phrase the question, it's like, whoa, democracy, or whoa, civic engagement, like, whoa, this is really big. In our work in youth civic engagement and youth get out the vote, the old adage is youth don't vote. Youth are apathetic, youth don't care. This is a huge lift. How are we going to get people to care about this? This is asking a lot. We found actually a lot more logistics based than you'd realized. A lot of the times it comes down to tactics. Can we make a vote plan? When are you going to vote? How are you going to vote? Do you know where your polling station is? Do you have any idea the ID that you need? Do you realize we can walk over right now? Do you realize you're already registered? Like what we have found over and over again, and this is across the spectrum, municipal, provincial, federal elections, more than 50% of the young people we talk to don't realize an election is happening. So really all we have to do is say, hey, there's an election coming up. Hey, do you know the polling station is around the corner from your house? Hey, do you want to make a plan to vote? That's it. We just solved democracy. It's actually not that hard.
All right. Okay. So that's a wrap. We're good.
We're good, right? It's easier than it seems. I think we become daunted by systemic change as this thing we can't take small steps to get involved in. But actually, a lot of the time, it is about step-by-step chipping away and just taking action and going forward.
And habit forming, right? Like that's why it's so important for young people to get out to vote for that first, second, third time. And everything we can throw at it means that they become habituated. And then it's a thing that's just like, oh yeah, it's voting time. Let's do that thing. But if we miss that window, which is why Amanda's work is so critical, then it's just a bit tougher, right? And so I'm very much interested in the conversation about lowering the voting age because I think there are going to be great benefits when we have that conversation. It's happening.
It's so true, Chi. It's like there's a demystifying element of this work, right? And your work and in mind. It's like, oh no, what happens if we get more women in office? What happens? Like, let's demystify the process here a bit and say, what does it look like on the other side? Actually, good things. Right? But how do we get there to the other side, right? We have to chip away along. We have to look at process. We have to look at regulation. We have to look at what it looks like when we get to the other side. What happens? Like I can drive young people to the polls and we do, but what happens when they show up? What's waiting for them? Are there candidates that inspire them? Are there policy changes that are happening? Are they going to see results from taking that action that would then encourage them to form that habit and come back again? So yes, I will get young people to the polls, and then we hand the baton over to say, All right, you're up.
We're only one question in, and there's so much of this already that is like just a perfect thing to pass over to talk about charities. I mean, the habit forming in particular is so interesting to me, and the plan and getting started. But focusing on civic engagement, there's a spectrum of involvement in civics. So, if we talk about voting and running for office, is your goal to move people along that continuum, or is it just to have them show up in some way?
I can answer this and then toss. I'm curious, Chi, what you think. Like in the case of New Majority, it's not all youth, right? So we don't target youth are not a monolith. We're not looking at all youth ever. I'm very specifically interested in unengaged first-time voters. So people who aren't on the definitely going to vote. I'm a political operative. I'm going to be a future chief of staff. I'm, poli-sci major. They're not my audience. You're bought in. And on the other side of that, I'm definitely not going to vote. I'm definitely not part of the system. That's a hard ask to move them over. There's a huge spectrum in the middle of disengaged young people who are disengaged for all kinds of reasons, including barriers that are in front of them, including awareness, knowledge, being familiar with your local community, having some kind of groundedness in your area where you're being asked to vote. Those are all major factors into bringing somebody from 0 to 1. Because once we bring them from 0 to 1, there's a whole lot more room to go up from there. But our lane is really on, let's just bring people from not at all engaged to somewhat engaged. And then from there, you can build democracy warriors. You can build the people that sign petitions. You can bring on the lobbying. You can bring on the activism side of things. But when you're talking about an activation organization like ours, I think it's really important to stay in our lane around moving people from nothing to something.
So that's interesting. So it's like you're getting folks off the starting line really requires understanding more of their sort of complex humanity and what are the reasons why they've never come to that start and never started the race, so to speak. But it's like once they start running, then it's like, okay, well, now we can add on different layers of sophistication and awareness and asks. But like that first step has to be meeting them as a person, given the context that they're coming from. I love that phrasing, Amanda. And yeah, Chi, interested to hear about your thoughts on a spectrum, because I know you've got thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, for us, we tend to work with folks who are, I like to describe them as like political curious, right? So maybe something's happened in their community and they want to figure out how they might be able to make that change. And so they come to our campaign school and they take part in our programming, and then they meet other people who are also thinking about running. And so they get involved in a campaign, or they decide, okay, I'm ready to do this. I'm going to pull together my campaign team. I'm going to do the fundraising. I'm going to make sure I've got a network of volunteers, and I'm hit and go. So it is a real spectrum for us, and all of the different entry points are critically important for the health of democracy. But for me, what I particularly love about our approach at Equal Voice is that we're multi-partisan. We actively say, parties, you are welcome, because we want your parties full of women and gender diverse folks making contributions to making politics better in this country. And in that multi-partisanship, there's a beautiful bridge building that happens where we see more commonalities. And actually, we may think we start in different places, but probably fundamentally, we all believe in community. We all believe in, well, many of us believe in the possibility and the gifts that Canada brings us. And many of us are still waiting for the returns and the dividends of what that can look like. And so that invitation to work across party lines, to reimagine leadership, is really at the core of what we try and center and anchor in our approach to campaign schools and our education programs.
I'm going to combine two questions here because I feel like that they're related. So when people throw up all sorts of objections about the political system or why they're not engaged, right? And they're like, oh, well, not voting is as good as voting because it sends a message, right? People will throw up all sorts of excuses as to why they don't, vote. Oh, it never changes anything anyway, or my voice is never represented. And I'm interested to hear, which of those barriers or challenges that people throw up are you perhaps a little bit cynical about? And which are the barriers and challenges that people cite that you feel like, oh no, that's legitimate and that's something that we need to address?
It's true in many sectors that there are loud minorities that tend to be naysayers, that tend to crap all over an idea or hope or agency that then has other people saying, yeah, we shouldn't vote. When I hear phrases like, it doesn't matter, my voice doesn't count, I really question how big that voice is, because it gets clicks, it gets hits, it becomes viral. People say, oh, yeah, we're voting. The ballots are no contest, which is not a thing in Canada. That's an American thing. But actually, what we find is the real barriers are in place are much more about access and much more about inclusivity and much more about who we're leaving behind. The majority of young people that I talk to, which is a group of young people, it's not all young people. I talk to unengaged people who aren't likely engaged in a political system. So a different audience from Chi's. But it's the group of people who are saying, like, I don't know. I've never voted before. Or I'm super socially anxious, and walking into a church basement and bringing a piece of ID that I think is good enough, but I've never been in there before and I don't really know where it is. And you want me to stand in a line and I'm not really sure what happens when I get there. And do I have to bring a pencil or not? Like, those things can be overwhelmingly difficult to take the action to come forward. When we can demystify what it means to get involved, what we find is on the other side, like we poll walk, right? We get young people who literally grab young people on the street and say, do you want to vote? Do you have 5 minutes? Like, quite literally, it's fun, it's engaging, they consent, they jump in and they say, yeah, let's go for a walk, right? And then they meet them after when they leave the polls and they say, how was it? And most of the time people are emotional, right? They have emotion behind it. It's like, wow, I did something. Wow, I feel like I have agency. I'm stressed about climate change. I don't know how I'm going to pay my rent. I'm worried I'm going to get rent evicted. I'm stressed out about the mental health of my loved ones. Like, we can't solve all that in a walk to the polls. I can't solve all of those big things when someone says my vote doesn't matter. But when they get in there and they check the box for the person they believe is going to represent them best going forward, it puts the agency back in that person's hand to say, okay, today I did something. And to me, once we get that far, you've converted them to take future actions. And so the ones that are like, it doesn't matter, I'm like, okay, well, maybe it doesn't matter, but maybe it does.
Yeah, Chi, I'm interested in your take there too. Yeah.
I was sitting in an airport a few weeks ago, chatting with someone, explaining a work that we do at Equal Voice, trying to get more women to run for office. A gentleman overheard the conversation I was in, looked at me and said, I'm 67 years old. I've never voted once in my life. And I was like, badge of honor, buddy. Okay, well, tell me a little bit about this. I think it's really easy for too many of us who have access to a lot to say, it doesn't really matter. But actually, the stakes are high, because for some of us who do think about or need to access a social safety net, see the direct impact of investments of programming in their day-to-day lives, these are actually really important conversations and questions about the kinds of leadership and the kinds of governing that will support or enable a charitable sector or the community sector. These are all political choices, and I want Canadians to feel like when they go and mark that ballot, it does matter, because it does. It does.
So do you think that people are motivated by community good or community well-being to take civic action? Or do you always have to tap into some sort of selfishness and a what's in it for me?
Oh, that's a provocative question. Amanda, do you want to go first?
I was like, Chi, answer, take that hard question. Take that hard question. Oh, God. What are people motivated by? Listen. Okay, my answer is the same as Chi, in that, being multi-partisan is a gift. And, youth are not a monolith, and there are different schools of thought and approaches to engaging different audiences on something like motivation and what causes someone to act. We find, when we're talking about getting youth from 0 to 1 or to the polls or to vote, bringing it back to community and a sense of connection does work. Individualization is effective, but most often what we hear from young people is that there is an increasing sense of isolation. There is an increasing sense of being alone and feeling like you're kind of out in the world, not really seeing the things that you care about reflected in the political system, which then can feel isolating. So doubling down on this, like it's good for you and only you, kind of just reinforces this idea that the whole system isn't really working for you in the first place. We find broadening it to this is about joining your community because you all actually do care about the planet. You do care about mental health. You do care about what happens in your communities. And we see that you care. And we know that you're not disengaged because you want to be disengaged. There's real barriers in place that aren't your fault, that are making it difficult to be engaged. And when you take an empathy lens and go back to the idea of you're actually not alone and you're joining a community by taking action on something like democracy, especially versus a like, you have to because it's your civic duty, like far more effective. Fun, connection, empathy. We'll play that game all day versus being in the like, hands down, you have to, it's your civic duty, it's your right. Everybody before you did it, so you have to do it too. Like it just, we don't see the results from approaches that are so individual.
I really love that phrasing of empathy lens, right? And it can still very much be about what they need or what they want, but it doesn't have to be individualistic and about their being aligned with their values and maybe talking to them in a way that they need to hear.
Exactly that. And, it's often very difficult. I have conversations every single day on my team about why should someone vote? Because why someone should vote is so personal. So I can't build a message that's going to work for everyone on why they should vote. That's so hard. It is way easier to pick up on how can I help you get there versus a why you should.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. It reminds me of like sort of reframing fundraising asks, right? As I'm not asking you for money, I'm giving you the opportunity to contribute to solving a problem that you care about, right? You are a busy person. You can't solve the climate crisis and raise your children and hold down your job and, do 800 other things. But I can ask you to contribute to this organization who is doing that work on your behalf. And like, what a gift, to be able to give you that opportunity, right? And so it's like, it's a similar kind of a flip that you're doing, right? Like, I can't tell you why you should vote, but I can tell you what voting does and the gift that is. That's great. I really like that. Chi, your thoughts on Lizz's question around, are folks motivated by community good or a sense of collective to vote versus, do you have to tap into like the what's in it for them?
This is such a powerful question. We were actually working through a version of it this morning on our programming call. I think that for many women, and so this is a very gendered take on this question, I think there's a real call for purpose, getting in there to change and fix a thing. So whether it's more access to special education because it's something they're seeing in their families and they want to fight for it, or, wanting to push for healthcare or whatever it is, there's a tendency for women and gender diverse folks who are stepping into the space of politics to do it with a bit of a very clear why. I don't know that that's always true for everybody who engages in the political system, but I think it is a tendency for the people who come through our framing. We're giving you skills to engage in a political system because you want to make a change and have an impact and represent yourself, your community, your neighbors. And so I think that one of the ways that people start to tap into that question is like, is my service a tool for that change making? And so if I put my name on the ballot, can I serve my communities in these ways? And I think that's a question and the pivot point that we engaged in by helping women say, yeah, okay, this is a thing that I should think about and consider pursuing. I think we know anecdotally that it takes women 7 times of being courted and asked before they're like, okay, I can do this. So even though they are the hands down the most qualified, have a ton of experience, have these credentials, have done X, Y, and Z. There are a lot of times, and I talk to cabinet ministers who have total imposter syndrome. I'm like, do you know what you've done? And you're doing it, and you still are nervous to make the fundraising ask. Or so there are parts of this, and especially I think because women are so socialized as people pleasers, that in a political context, there's a really interesting tension there, because what is rewarded is loyalty and kind of moving within a system. And that's sometimes a bit of tension with critical thinking, kind of exploring new ways of doing, providing alternative approaches. So I think there's sometimes that challenge in political systems that we want to be able to make sure that candidates who are going in are prepared to sit with and understand as a tension, knowing that, we want to see politics be a place where people really thrive and succeed. Doesn't matter their gender. Politics should be good for men too.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of holding those two things in balance and in tension. So it can be really difficult to ask people to commit to taking actions where there's no necessarily like immediate or specific visible result of that action, right? And like if I can use a sports metaphor, for example, it's like when somebody is like, I'm going to become a runner, or, I'm going to run a marathon, right? And then like they spend the next week and a half or 2 weeks, trying to run more than 5K without dying. And they're just like, I can't do it, right? And so it's like there doesn't seem to be any progress or any return for the effort, right? Because they've really kind of looked at it in a short-term sort of lens. So how do you get people to sort of think longer term about the impact of their engagement and convince them that, no, this specific action, I know you're not necessarily going to see a result tomorrow, but it does help.
Trust that the hard work is worth it.
Yeah. How do you do that?
So I've only been at Equal Voice for about 18 months, but I have been following the storyline of women's political leadership in this country since about 2000. At that time, we were sitting at 21% women in the House of Commons. So like 1 in 5 MPs is a woman. That's only 25 years ago, 20 some years ago. So in that time, we have seen some really extraordinary achievements and, glass ceilings, lots of women premiers, a handful of women premiers, but like we have seen some progress. And so going back to those big wins and reminding ourselves of the powerful story of what different kinds of leadership has contributed into this country is what keeps me really motivated, even though we're still sitting at 30%. Did you know we're 64th place in the world on our gender equality ranking? Like, that's garbage for a country that wraps itself as being progressive and feminist. Like, Canadians need to wake up to that and realize that it's really easy to say that we have gender equality. This is a benchmark piece, so we have nowhere close to achieving that. And I think we can do it in 2 election cycles. I think in 25 and 29, if we look at a 5% bump both times out, we get over 40%. And that is a really doable and achievable thing for us to wrap ourselves around in terms of a goal. It may or may not be in my next strat plan. But making sure that we take the time to celebrate all of those small wins, because otherwise we get lost in the sea of so much hard. There's so much hard in the system.
Absolutely. And like you only get to the goal via the progress, right? Like you don't just like jump from start line to finish line. Like you have to make your way along the whole course, right? That's really great. Amanda, same kind of question to you.
Same answer, right? It's like my answer is like the small wins are so critical, and figuring out where they are is an art, not a science, where the wins are. So for us, looking at something like turnout metrics, right? So very similar to Chi, we didn't plan this, but we too have a 5% lift goal. And ours is 5% youth voter turnout because we saw a 7% dip between 2019 and 2021. Pandemic related, pause on campus voting. lots of issues for why youth voter turnout is on a decline. To me, I'm like, great, nothing but up from here, right? I see the opportunity to lift up. It's 744,000 young people I need to move to the polls to get a 5% lift in the next federal election. Sometimes my staff say no chance. And I can't believe I just said that publicly, but it's true. Sometimes there's doubt. There's doubt that we'll do it.
Yeah.
And so what I say is like, well, let's look at the way we can win. Let's look at the recent Mississauga election that we just worked, where we had a 4% lift, right? Was it a smaller election? Was it smaller population? Sure. Did we prove that we lifted turnout and it's possible? 100%. Look at small municipal campaigns that we work on that give people some momentum to go forward. And like, I firmly believe, if you're going to go back to your runner's analogy, like, the advice is like set a target and then buy yourself a gift or a reward, like get yourself the new shoes when you've been running for 3 months, or like pick the thing. Like, even if you're yourself giving some type of like self-generated reward for getting through the process, I think those things are important. It's important to say, we're doing the thing. It's better than not doing the thing. Doing nothing is not going to strengthen democracy. No action is not the way we're going to feel better when we have no hope. So maybe if we do something, anything, it adds up. It's all the same. We all know this working in nonprofit sector, but like every little bit does count.
I just thinking about your team too, though, and like just also acknowledging the humanity of doing hard work. And like, there can be doubt, right? Like, we can acknowledge that we're not sure things are going to work and try them anyway, go into some things with fear. I think pretending that we aren't scared of it, not particularly helpful anyway.
100%. Oh my God, 100%.
What if we said, okay, let's say we do 4%. And we moved 600,000 young people. Like, you don't think I'm going to stand around screaming from the rooftops that we won, right? Like, it's great. This is good. Everybody's happy. Set a target because a target is good and we want to work towards something. And if we don't hit it immediately, we'll get it the next time, right? But like, let's set a target and try to get there. And then we'll learn what we didn't do this time that we need to do next time to get there. And then we'll get there. Losses, we don't have to be afraid of losses.
No, absolutely. I mean, and to sort of really beat this whole running metaphor over the head and really kill it and beat it down into the ground. But, I remember training one time for a half marathon, and then the race day came. I've been training for months. Race day came and I had terrible chest infections. There's just no way I could run. Like, I couldn't run. And I was so bummed. And then I was like, everything was in the training. Everything was about the training, like the way that it improved my life, the way that it, gave me all this time, made me go be outside, even in the winter, like for hours at a time. Like, everything that was good about my life in relationship to that race was in all of the preparation that led up to race day. Yeah, I didn't get to run the race, but like, that was kind of irrelevant. And that was like the big lesson to learn in that. So it's like, same thing. It's like, yeah, we're going to set this goal of 5%. And that means we're going to put in all of the effort related to try to get that goal. And so if we get 3.5%, like, then that's amazing, right? Everything is about the process and the journey. 100% of it. I hate to have the last word, and I didn't really mean to to have that last word. And maybe we cut all that out because, Amanda, what you left us with was really great and poignant. But yeah, just in the interest of time and everything, we'll wrap it up and leave it there. And I'm so grateful to both of you for being with us today. I'm so grateful for your friendship over many, many years, and so delighted to watch, first of all, you to get to know each other, but all the twists and turns that your careers have taken, and each twist and turn just like is more impressive than the last one. So yeah, really appreciate you both. Grateful to know you.
Oh, yeah.
Anya.
I can't end on anything that good at all, Anya. Come on.
Anya. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, this was so much fun.
Right off the bat of that interview, Chi and Amanda touched on the importance of cultivating a habit of voting. And Lizz, how often do we talk about cultivating new habits when we're talking about digital transformation? Always, all the time. And using technologies better or differently typically means leaving old habits behind and working on cultivating new ones. So I thought that that was a really clear takeaway and parallel that we can make between their work and digital transformation. So if we can cultivate a habit of civic engagement the way that New Majority and Equal Voice do, why can't we do the same for nonprofits? Why can't we think about cultivating new habits of using technology to be more collaborative, more transparent, and more efficient? It all seems very possible.
Yeah, and the other thing that stood out to me that's super relevant is the feeling of accomplishment you get when, you get someone out to vote and get them into political actions. Even if it's just voting, it's empowering to have done something, especially in a day and age where it can feel like there's nothing we can do about these massive challenges facing our world. And applying that to this digital transformation work, we can think about small wins that even just that little change can make you feel like you've made progress towards your ultimate goal.
Absolutely. I think it was Amanda who described new first-time voters feeling emotional after casting their ballot. And I felt the same way the first time I cast a ballot too. I don't know what it was, but there was certainly a sense of I've participated in something that is bigger than me and that is about some sort of collective action and community building. And it is absolutely true that digital transformation within any organization is a collective effort. And when you are facing that massive project of digital transformation, it can feel super overwhelming and like you're not going to have an impact and you're not going to make a change. But when you actually do that small thing, just one small thing to move your organization forward, even if it's just, introducing a collaborative document or, like we mentioned, using a form, you're going to be amped, psyched. You're probably not going to cry, but you will be. You'll be pretty excited about it.
I don't know. When I discovered that Gmail has templates and I didn't need to keep rewriting the same email to submit my expense reports, I was pretty amped. I might have cried.
A few tears were shed.
I think the last thing is really just that feeling of today I did something to make a difference is a great feeling. And I also really liked how Chi and Amanda talked about creating a plan and that being a powerful tool that can get people off to the starting line. They talked about use maybe just not knowing where to start. And so when organizations have a plan, which, spoiler alert, you can get one of those on Charity Growth Academy, the effort really then just becomes about sticking to the plan. So getting that plan and taking a step, and then you can just follow it through.
Absolutely. Plans are always a great idea and an amazing first step to taking specific and meaningful action.
Thanks for listening to Digital Comfort Zone today. We hope we kept it fun and not scary. There were some really great takeaways from today's episode that should help you feel good about taking a small action that will have big rewards.
The best way that you can get started on taking those small actions and reaping those big rewards is to check out the Charity Growth Academy and start your assessment today. You can do it right now, even as we're still talking. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please give us a 5-star rating. This helps other people discover the show.
Thank you to our amazing guests, Chi Nguyen and Amanda Munday, and our podcast producers, Christian Robillard and Richard Villeneuve at Purpose Podcasting. This podcast has been a production of Charity Growth Academy by Canada Helps. Support for Charity Growth Academy has been generously provided by MasterCard ChangeWorks and MasterCard Impact Fund.